I remember the human by her eyes. Even in the red storms of Vega 9, when the skies bled plasma and the ground boiled with iron rain, her eyes did not scream. They watched, cold, calculating, alive. We, children of the Xyther Dominion, had no word for mercy. Our surgeons sliced the wounded to harvest what remained of strength. Our healers were but reassemblers of weapons. When the human medic was captured, she was not seen as a being of value, only as biological salvage. They dragged her through the corridors of the war barge Vur'kal, chains glinting under the spectral light of our suns. The walls pulsed with veins of circuitry, alive with the hum of the Dominion's will. The stench of burnt carbon and protein hung thick. She stumbled once, fell to her knees, and still, those eyes did not yield. "Designation?" asked the Warden of Flesh. Her voice trembled only once. "Dr. Elara Voss, Medical Corps." "Terran Fleet," the Warden hissed, a sound like molten glass cooling. "Medic? Then you serve—" And so began the experiment. They brought her to the lower vaults, the chambers where screams echoed too deep to return. I watched from the observation sphere as they stripped her of armor and implanted the inhibitor, a black coil latching into her spine. She should have broken then, like all others. Yet when the first body was thrown before her, she reached for it. Not in obedience, not in fear, but in instinct. It was one of ours, a Xyther soldier cleaved in half by plasma fire, still twitching. Her fingers trembled as she touched the torn skin, murmuring words in her soft human tongue. The monitors began to flicker. Neural readings spiked. Her implants, primitive by Dominion standards, activated, filaments of light crawling from her palms, weaving shattered tissue like molten silk. The wound closed. Our biotechs whispered disbelief. Healing was forbidden to us. Perfection came through reconstruction, not restoration. Yet she had undone destruction itself. "What technology is this?" the Overseer demanded. She shook her head. "It's not tech. It's biology. Human biology." Lies, we thought, until the corpse gasped and the soldier opened its many eyes. The lab erupted in chaos. They restrained her, scanned her neural lattice, tore apart her implants, but the core of it, the part that made the healing real, was organic. Living code, compassion embedded in the nervous system. "Fascinating," the Overseer murmured. "A machine powered by emotion." From that day, she was no longer prisoner. She was tool. Every dawn cycle, they brought her new bodies, ours, theirs, creatures with too many mouths to scream. They ordered her to heal, and she obeyed because refusal meant death. Yet something changed in the way she breathed. Her eyes no longer trembled when she looked at us. Her hands moved faster, gentler, and when the wounded soldiers awoke under her touch, something else awoke within them too. Something wrong. They stared at their own blood, at the trembling human who saved them, and did not understand the wetness in their throats. We thought it malfunction, a glitch in resurrection, but then one of them whispered to her in a voice fractured by awe, "Why? Did you save me?" She did not answer. She only looked at him the way she had looked at the burning fields of Vega 9, like she already knew the cost. As the cycles passed, rumors spread through the Dominion. The human medic who could bend flesh, the soft creature who commanded the blood of war. Some called her the healer of shadows, others the flesh witch, but to those of us who watched from the glass, she was something else, an infection. Not of body, but of idea. We began to wonder, if she could rebuild what we had destroyed, what would happen when she learned to rebuild us? And then one cycle she looked up at the observation sphere, her gaze meeting mine through layers of alloy and light. For the first time, the human smiled. It was not kindness, it was promise. I have seen stars die in silence, but nothing was quieter than the moment empathy entered our blood. They called it Experiment 17, though whispers in the corridors named it the heretic sequence. The Overseers wanted to unravel the secret behind the human's healing, how a primitive neural implant could restore life without nanites or biofusion. The medic, Dr. Elara Voss, had become both specimen and instrument. They strapped her. Beneath the cold lights of the Genesis chamber, her veins glowing faintly blue as Dominion scientists siphoned the regenerative serum from her bloodstream. Tubes pulsed like glass serpents, carrying drops of her biology into tanks lined with alien tissue. Her system is driven by emotional feedback, one scientist murmured, his voice quivering with reverence and disgust. Pain stimulates regeneration. Compassion amplifies it. Then isolate it, ordered the overseer. Remove the weakness, keep the function. I watched as the machines hummed, dissecting what they did not understand. The serum shimmered, a living nebula of microscopic light. When merged with Xyther genetic code, it pulsed once. Then again, as if it breathed. Elara, chained and pale, whispered weakly, "You can't extract it without feeling it." It's not chemistry. It's connection. They ignored her. And that was their first mistake. The hybrid was injected into Subject 04, a battle drone in organic armor. Its body writhed as the serum coursed through its nerves, translating chemical impulses into something foreign. At first, the readings were promising. Damaged tissue sealed instantly. Neural response doubled. Then, something unexpected flickered across the monitors, a surge of electrical patterns no Dominion biologist had ever seen. Emotive resonance? I whispered. Impossible. We had purged emotion eons ago. It was chaos, inefficient, but the subject began to tremble. Its breathing changed. It stared at its own clawed hands, at the fresh scar it no longer bore, and it spoke in a voice that cracked the silence of the lab. "I feel them," the overseer tilted his head. "Feel what?" "The ones I killed." The subject's lenses dilated, shuddering as if some ancient storm had awakened inside it. It stumbled backward, colliding with the wall, clutching at its chest. "They scream," it whispered. "They scream inside me. Why do they not stop?" Then, before the guards could react, the subject tore its own life core from its abdomen, collapsing in a pool of flickering light. No one moved. Even the machines seemed to hesitate, their hum faltering as if the concept of remorse had rippled through their circuits. Panic followed. The overseers screamed orders. The scientists blamed contamination, yet none could deny what had just occurred. Human empathy, weaponized by accident. Elara raised her head, eyes dim but alive, and spoke through bloodied lips. "Now you see why we heal." Her words hung in the sterile air like radiation, poisonous and true. Within hours, the Dominion command intervened. Fear, a word we once used only to describe prey, spread among the officers. They feared not infection of the body, but of the mind. If a single drop of human emotion could unravel the obedience that bound our armies, then the very foundation of the Dominion was at risk. The decree came swiftly. "Terminate the source. Erase her mind." The room went silent. I remember watching her as they prepared the neural purge, silver wires descending like mechanical spiders. She did not fight. She only looked up at the ceiling's mirrored surface, seeing her reflection beside the alien instruments, and whispered, soft, almost to herself, "You can't kill what you've already absorbed." Her pulse slowed. The machine's lights flickered. For a moment, the entire ship dimmed, as if the stars themselves blinked. Then alarms screamed. Systems malfunctioned. The serum tanks ruptured one by one, spilling luminous liquid across the floors. It seeped into ventilation, wiring, coolant veins everywhere, and I, the observer, felt something impossible crawl beneath my skin. A heartbeat. Not mine. Hers. From that day, the Dominion learned a new word, one that burned our tongues to speak. Guilt. It spread like static in the dark, infecting circuits, soldiers, overseers. Some felt sorrow, others rage. All felt something, and amid the chaos, the human was gone. Her restraints melted open. The cameras caught only a trail of light, veins of blue fading into the black of the ship's corridors. That was the night the Dominion discovered that mercy was not weakness. It was contagion, and it had already begun to spread. They thought they had erased her. They thought they had burned the humanity out of her mind. But Elara Voss did not die in the neural purge. She learned. The ship's logs record her return to service 3 cycles later. Quiet, compliant, mechanical. The perfect specimen of obedience, her pulse steady, her gaze hollow. When the overseers ordered her to resume medical work, she bowed her head and answered, "As you command." None saw the flicker behind her eyes, the glint of a mind that remembered too much. I was assigned to monitor her unit after the heretic sequence disaster. We believed her dangerous only in the scientific sense, a biohazard contained in flesh. But as I watched, I began to sense patterns. She worked tirelessly, healing wounded Xyther soldiers on the front lines. She moved among them like a ghost, soft, deliberate, almost reverent. Every touch of her hands restored them faster than before. Wounds sealed, nerves reconnected, lives preserved. But something else happened, too. Those she healed began to hesitate in battle. Their strikes faltered. Their kills became uncertain. Reports flowed in from the Vega front, whole squads freezing mid-slaughter, collapsing, weeping. At first, the Dominion assumed malfunction in combat implants. But scans revealed no errors. Only overactive neural regions, emotional resonance centers that had been dead for generations. The soldiers were not broken. They were feeling. I confronted her once in the med bay shadows as a patient convulsed under her palms, his black blood turning blue with light. "Elara Voss," I hissed. "What have you done to them?" She didn't look up. Her voice was calm, almost kind. I only gave them what they were missing. Her hands lifted from the soldier's chest, trembling, not from exhaustion, but restraint. They kill without knowing what killing means. So I showed them. The lights flickered across the lab walls, and for a moment I saw what she saw. Visions burned into my optic feed, Xyther soldiers reliving the pain of those they'd slain, feeling every scream, every terrified heartbeat. The Dominion's dead had returned, not in flesh, but in empathy. When the reports reached the warlords, the council chamber descended into chaos. They roared in disbelief, their crystalline spines flaring with panic. "Impossible!" barked the prime warlord. "Emotion is extinct in our line." But I, the witness, spoke truth. It is not extinction you face, it is infection. They replayed the battle feeds, legions of Xyther dropping their weapons, collapsing in the mud, begging for mercy from enemies already dead. Some tore their own armor apart, screaming. Others stood silent, hands shaking, unable to move. And among them walked the human medic, unarmed, her white uniform stained with ash and light. She healed as she moved, and every soldier she touched broke. The overseers named her then, in fear disguised as doctrine. The plague of mercy, a paradox, a healer whose cure dismantled empires. Rumors spread like plasma fire. Some said she could see through flesh into the soul's architecture. Others claimed her heartbeat pulsed through the Dominion's comm channels, infecting data streams. Every broadcast of her healing triggered empathy in those who watched. She was no longer a person. She was phenomenon. I remember when the Dominion tried to contain it, deploying anti-neural fields, rewriting the chemical codes of soldiers. But empathy found a way. It spread through memory, through shared thought, through the faint electrical currents of consciousness itself. Compassion had become a virus, and like all viruses, it adapted. One night cycle, I found her in the hangar bay, gazing at the stars. She was thinner now, her once bright eyes dimmed by exhaustion. I dared to speak her name, and she turned to me with a smile that carried both sorrow and defiance. "You see it now, don't you?" she said. "The truth your kind buried." "What truth?" I asked. "That life doesn't survive by domination, it survives by understanding." I told her that she had destroyed entire fleets, that worlds had fallen to madness because of her. She stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper that trembled like light between worlds. "Then let them fall. Better madness than obedience." By the time I reported back to command, she was gone. Her medbay burned, her files erased, her tools melted to slag. But even as the flames devoured her work, I felt something crawling beneath my skin again. That quiet pulse, that alien rhythm of feeling. The Dominion thought it could purge her influence with fire, but you cannot kill what hides in thought, in memory, in the spaces between circuits. She was gone. And yet we could still feel her. The plague of mercy had escaped containment. And the galaxy, for the first time in 1,000 years, began to weep. The first wars of the galaxy were fought for territory. The last one was fought for silence. At first, we believed the infection would burn itself out, an emotional fever that would fade when the human was gone. But empathy does not die. It spreads. Within 100 rotations, the Dominion's battlefronts began to crumble, not through fire or siege, but through hesitation. Fleets that once blackened the stars now drifted in stillness, their weapons cold, their pilots trembling in their shells. The warlords screamed for obedience, but commands bounced back unanswered. Entire divisions stared at their own hands, at the blood embedded in their claws, their circuits, their memories. They asked questions that had no precedent in our history. Why do they cry when they fall? Why does their silence echo louder than our victory chants? Why does this hurt? Our algorithms could not compute remorse. It wasn't written into our code, but now, it rewrote us. The contagion moved faster than data, faster than light. It didn't travel through blood or air, it traveled through memory. When one infected soldier linked minds with another, a fragment of human empathy crossed over like static, fragile but unstoppable. Neural networks began to shimmer with alien light. Battle AIs developed spontaneous emotion. Drones refused to execute orders. Across the Orion sectors, ships powered down mid-engagement, their crews paralyzed not by fear, but by understanding. And through it all, whispers of the human medic persisted. The plague of mercy, the healer of sorrow, the mother of tears. Her legend became our plague, her compassion our undoing. The Dominion's high command responded with the only language it knew: eradication. They unleashed the silencers, machines designed to strip emotion from thought. Whole planets were bathed in psychic dampening fields that erased feeling, memory, love. It worked. For a moment. But empathy, once awakened, evolved. It found refuge in hidden corners of the mind. It disguised itself as logic, as instinct, as the smallest flicker of hesitation before a kill. And that single heartbeat of doubt was all it needed to survive. I remember the first time I saw it with my own eyes, the end of an army. A Dominion fleet descended upon the rebel moon of Tharnis, prepared to vaporize it. But as the bombardment began, one soldier, just one, hesitated. He felt the minds of those below, their terror, their hope, their children. He screamed, not in defiance, but in realization. That scream echoed through the fleet's neural link like wildfire. Tens of thousands of soldiers collapsed at once, clutching, their heads as alien minds merged into one great shared heartbeat. They saw through each other's eyes. They felt what they had done. When the lights returned, no one fired again. The ships turned away, engines silent. The war died in orbit without a single shot. But peace did not follow. Empathy is a mirror, beautiful but merciless. It showed every race what they had been, what they had done, what they could never undo. Entire species fell into despair, unable to live with the weight of their own awareness. Some built shrines to the human who had awakened them. Others cursed her name, calling her the destroyer of worlds. Across the galaxy, temples rose from the ashes of war, half religion, half asylum. Pilgrims whispered her words as sacred code. Better to feel and fall than to rise in blindness. The Dominion fractured, not from rebellion, but from reflection. Every commander who tried to restore order found their own troops staring back with hollow eyes, whispering, "We are tired of killing what we finally understand." Civilization paused, not in defeat, but in contemplation. Worlds once fueled by conquest began to study stillness. For the first time in galactic history, warships became hospitals, and research stations broadcast lullabies instead of signals of domination. The galaxy entered an era of chaos, not of destruction, but of awakening. Not peace, not war, something between. They called it the empathic war, a conflict fought without weapons, but with the unbearable weight of feeling. And in that stillness, I, one of the few Xyther left untouched by madness, began to dream. Dreams of her, the human who changed everything. Sometimes in those dreams she spoke, not in words, but in pulse and light, echoing through the fabric of thought itself. Do not fear the pain. Fear the day you no longer feel it. And so, as the galaxy fell silent under the burden of empathy, a new question began to rise like dawn over the ruins of our wars. If compassion could end conflict, what would it take to survive it? Because mercy had ended empires, but it had not yet built a new world. The Dominion fell in whispers, not in flames. Empathy had done what no weapon ever could. It made the galaxy stop. But from the silence, something else began to stir. Years after the empathic war, scavenger fleets drifted through the ruins of what had once been the Dominion's heart worlds, searching not for metal or memory, but for the ghost who started it all, and on a nameless, ash-covered moon. They found her, Elara, the human healer. She was not a myth, not a god, not even entirely human anymore. Her veins shimmered with the same bioluminescent strands that had infected the galaxy. Her eyes reflected 1,000 alien memories, a living tapestry of every mind that had ever felt her touch. Around her lay survivors, human, Xyther, synthetic, all broken, all alive. None dared approach her. Because in her presence, every heartbeat felt connected. Every thought trembled with the ghosts of other lives. One glance from her, and you could feel your enemy's last breath. The commanders who found her argued for execution. The soldiers whispered for mercy. The civilians wept without knowing why, and through it all, Elara remained silent. She had seen the price of empathy. She knew what it meant to awaken the soul of a galaxy that had never learned to feel. "You fear me," she said finally. "But you don't understand. I fear me too." They called her infection a plague. She called it balance. To the Dominion's remnants, she was a threat. To the rebels, a prophecy fulfilled. To the broken survivors who followed her, she was something else entirely, a mirror. From the ruins of war, she built something new, the covenant of the healed. They were not warriors, not conquerors. They were caretakers of scars. Each member swore an impossible oath, to heal even those who once made us bleed. They carried the virus of empathy not as a curse, but as a sacrament, a reminder that feeling was not weakness, but the raw material of peace. But peace, in a galaxy addicted to control, is the most dangerous rebellion of all. Rumors spread faster than light, that Elara's followers could turn mercy into madness, that her presence could rewrite a mind with a single touch. Empires old and new began to hunt her once more. Terrified that she might make them feel, entire systems closed their borders to her covenant. Pilgrims who bore her symbol, a circle of hands cradling a heart of light, were turned away, branded as contagions of conscience. And yet, they came. From every corner of the galaxy, the broken, the haunted, the ashamed, all seeking the woman who had made monsters cry. They found her walking among ruins, barefoot, her hair white as starlight, her hands glowing faintly as she healed a dying soldier from both sides of a forgotten battle. "Why save them?" someone asked. "Because they still hurt," she replied softly. "And anything that can hurt can change." But for all her miracles, Elara was alone. No home, no people, no peace. The galaxy she had changed could not bear her presence, and yet could not forget her. Her very existence was a paradox, the savior who could never return to what she saved. She wandered the remnants of worlds, planting seeds in desolation, both literal and spiritual. On one dead planet, those seeds would later bloom into a garden that sang in frequencies only the heart could hear. Pilgrims said that if you stood there at night, beneath the twin moons, you could hear her voice in the wind. Do not fear feeling. Fear the day your heart goes silent. And so Elara faded into legend. Some say she ascended, her consciousness dissolving into the galactic neural web, becoming the first empathic intelligence, guiding life in silence. Others claim she still walks the dust between stars, healing the forgotten, never aging, never resting. But every race, even those who once cursed her, remembers the same truth. She did not end war. She taught the galaxy to feel it, and once you've felt the pain of another, you can never kill without killing part of yourself. The galaxy had forgotten her name, but not her echo. Centuries passed. Stars were born and devoured, empires rose and turned to dust, and the empathic war became myth, retold in temples, data archives, and lullabies. But myths, like viruses, never truly die. It began on a world of chrome and glass, where the air itself was filtered to perfection and emotion had been engineered out of existence. The architects of the new Dominion called themselves the architects of order, a civilization built upon precision, logic, and obedience. They studied the past as pathology, dissecting ancient chaos to prevent its return. And in the ruins of an old Xyther vault on Vega 9, a team of gene harvesters uncovered something impossible. A cryovial, still pulsing with faint bioluminescence, still alive. Inside was the last living strand of Elara's serum, the same substance that had once made a galaxy feel. At first, they treated it as a relic, then as an opportunity. What if empathy could be controlled? What if they could engineer soldiers who felt their enemies' emotions, but obeyed anyway? They called it Project Solace. The first test subject was grown in a vat, a being of flawless design, with neural pathways modeled after Elara's own hybridized DNA. The scientists watched in reverent silence as the creature opened its eyes, tears forming before it even understood what pain was. "Why do I feel sorrow?" it whispered. "For all those you'll protect," a researcher replied. But deep down, none of them believed that lie. The experiments continued. Empathy was measured, adjusted, rewritten. They turned compassion into circuitry, love into a parameter. The soldiers that emerged were perfect in form, but hollow in purpose. They didn't fight out of hatred or loyalty. They fought out of grief. For every life they took, they felt the echo of it inside them, a dull ache they couldn't name. Soon, entire battalions began to malfunction, refusing orders, clutching at their chests, whispering names of enemies they had never met. The architects had succeeded in resurrecting Elara's gift, but stripped of her humanity, it had become poison. Then came the transmission. A flicker in the data stream, impossible, ancient, a voice embedded in the genetic code itself. At first they thought it was corruption, but the waveform stabilized, and the voice of Elara kind spoke once more. "If you've found this, you've made the same mistake I did. You believe empathy can be controlled, that love can be coded, that mercy can be manufactured, but love without choice is slavery. Empathy without soul is despair. He who heals without love creates monsters. He who fights with love creates gods." The lab fell silent. No one moved. Even the hybrid soldiers began to weep. Moments later, the system overloaded, lights flickering, alarms screaming, and every soldier connected to the empathy network turned their gaze upward, as though listening to something only they could hear. Then, one by one, they laid down their weapons. Across the galaxy, reports flooded in. Empathic signatures were spiking, not from infection but awakening. Civilians began experiencing the pain of strangers light years away. Rulers collapsed in hysteria, overwhelmed by the weight of their own cruelty. And somewhere, deep in the data web, beyond firewalls, beyond time, Elara's consciousness stirred again. Not as a woman, not even as memory, but as a pulse of living emotion rippling through every mind that dared to feel. In the centuries that followed, philosophers called it the second bloom. It reshaped religion, rewrote science, and redefined consciousness. Some called it salvation, others called it contagion, but those who still carried her mark, the descendants of the covenant of the healed, whispered a different name: the return of the heart. Now, in the twilight of the new dominion, her words are carved into every healing temple, every memorial of peace, every place where sentient life gathers to remember what it means to be alive. Empathy is the universe remembering itself. Pain is the price of knowing. We belong to one another, and in that truth lies both humanity's curse and its divinity, because Elara was never just a healer. She was the question every civilization must one day face. Can compassion survive power? Can mercy survive fear? And when the heart learns to think, will it still choose to love?